literally a month today I left Perth. Where do I even begin? Homesickness got to me so badly. Mwah, chef's kiss. Everyone's asleep when I'm awake. I'm gonna do it all. Hello, and welcome back. Not necessarily to a vlog, but a bit of a Q&A. I just want to apologize because this week I have a vlog ready to go. It was my moving vlog. Like, I was so excited to film this the whole week. I filmed packing up, moving, everything, my new place, and something's gone wrong with the export. And it looks like the audio is working perfectly fine, but it looks like I'm speaking in slow motion. So I'm trying to work around that. But in the meantime, because I'm coming up on being in the US for a month now, I thought I'd film a little like Q&A about kind of life here, the differences between Australia and America, like how I'm really doing, what's life as a Harvard student. So yeah, I've brainstormed a list of questions and let's get into it. So question one, I had, what are the biggest differences between Australia and America? What is the most shocking difference? Where do I even begin? Firstly, which is probably the most shocking as well, is walking on the other side of the road. Like, obviously Americans drive on the other side of the road, right? But with that, first, their steering wheels are on the opposite side of the car. So like my first night, literally the night I landed, I got into my Uber in the left-hand side, like you do in Australia. And then I had this moment of like, why do I have no leg space? Like, what is going on here? And then I looked up and I saw that the steering wheel was like right in front of me, and then there was actually so much leg room in the seat next to me. And I was like, oh, that's where I'm supposed to be sitting. But yeah, even though I don't have a car, I've been walking and / the occasional bike ride everywhere. But I did not realize how ingrained it is in me to walk on the left-hand side of the road. Like, I remember my first day in New York and I was just such a typical tourist because I kept bumping into people and I was like, why is everyone walking on this side of the road? And then I had this moment of, oh, Tali, you're the problem. And I have to, like, if anyone sees me in public, all I'm thinking inside my head is walk on the right, walk on the right, walk on the right, walk on the right. Like, it is such an ingrained habit in you, and you don't actually realize until you're in a country like this where everything's swapped over. And all of a sudden, you need to swap over too. So that's been probably like, I didn't realize how hard that would be to adjust. I'm getting better, but if I'm like by myself on a path, I like drift over to the left. It's quite funny, and I can feel myself doing it, and I'm like, nope, I'm back on the right. And then other than that, so similar differences like that is the temperature. So people will be like, oh, it's 100 degrees tomorrow, and I'll be like, so like 20, 30. And then they also have the pounds versus kilos. Like my first time using weights at the gym here at Harvard, it was like 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds. And I was like, so I kind of just had to assume everything was roughly double and go from there because I have no idea what that conversion is. The other differences, I've been really freaked out by the toilets here, which sounds so weird. But for example, like it's mostly the Harvard toilets where they don't have like a toilet bowl. It's just the bottom half of it. And it's so natural to everyone here. And I'm like, no, like where's the other half of your toilet? Like this makes no sense to me. Like this, and it's, and some of them are automatic as well. And I'm like, no, I don't like giving that control over. I hate it, actually. And then other differences will be certain words. So I found myself saying certain words, which I did not expect. And then my like American friends will stare at me and be like, what? So for me, like this is a crew, right? But I would call this a jumper. And when I said jumper, no idea what people meant. I said piss take. Again, I had to translate. Like I've never had to translate a word in my life. And all of a sudden I was like, what's the difference? And then just certain ways I say things. Like I said squirrel the other day because there's squirrels everywhere and I'm like obsessed. But then the Americans were like, did you say school? And I was like, no, squirrel. So other than that, it's just the accent barrier. But I'd say those are the 3 biggest differences I've definitely come across. Question 2, How is the food? This is a loaded question for sure. I'll give a little grocery overview first. So firstly, Trader Joe's. Mwah, chef's kiss, we love. It is so stupidly cheap. If you think about Coles and like Woolworths prices, half the price, I'd say. Like I can do my weekly grocery shop for $50 to $60 from Trader Joe's, which I think is just like iconic, because Woolworths it would be 80 to 100 minimum. So we love that. Whole Foods they have as well, but that's kind of like the equivalent of Coles Woolworths prices. So by here, that's like quite expensive. And they also have obviously Target, and they have a grocery section, but that's kind of a bit of everything. And I more so go there for like room decor. It's kind of like Kmart. That's how I describe it. Target is Australia's Kmart, but they do still have like, I'd say they have a slightly bigger range than Kmart still. They also have CVS. That's kind of like convenient. They also have 7-Eleven, but CVS is like a little bit of everything. You know, like they have a whole pharmacy section upstairs, but then they also have like grocery tidbits and, you know, the essentials and like last minute grabs that you may need. The food. So while I was in New York, I kind of structured my days around like iconic spots that I wanted to eat at. So it was kind of like Los Tacos, or it was Levan Bakery, or where else did I go? Joe's Pizza or Chelsea's Market, so places like that. But since being here, I've struggled to kind of get into like a good routine with food. Like I've said, my relationship with food has definitely struggled, but that comes from a lack of not having a routine yet, which I'll kind of dive into the more I start talking about Harvard. But the food overall, I'm a lot more aware of just how it just, like I feel just slightly more, like I say the word weighed down, but what I mean by that is just more like gluggy and slow moving, and it just feels a bit more, everything feels a bit more chemically and a bit more processed. Like I went to order some like bagels for my grocery shop the other day, and then this warning popped up for a chemical that causes cancer, and I was like, sick. So I'm honestly tending towards more like gluten-free options or vegetarian / organic, just because like, yeah, I have noticed a difference in my like day-to-day energy. It's a lot slower here versus what it was, in Australia. So yeah, that's been interesting. It's definitely a work in progress, but yeah, we'll get there. The other thing I just realized I forgot to talk about as well was the whole like tipping setup, because obviously in Australia we don't tip and tax is included in everything we pay for with the GST. So coming here, it was kind of like it was a shock to the system. But basically, pretty much the only time I've actually had to use cash was tipping the housemaids that were cleaning my hotel room in New York. Everything else has pretty much been, you tap your card and then they have the system where you can either choose, it'll be like 10, 15, 18, 15, 18, 20, and you kind of like choose depending on how generous you're feeling that day. Well, that's how I've been operating anyway. And then when you have a sit down meal, so I had my first proper sit down meal with one of my roommates last night. And basically, you have your meal, the tax gets added on to the end of it. So I think ours came to like 30-ish dollars, and then there was $3 to $4 in tax. So you give them your card, they put that process through, and then they come back with your receipt for the tip. And you have to do anywhere between, I think it's like 15 to 20%. Americans, don't come at me if that's wrong, but that's just what I'm remembering. And so you calculate 20% of whatever price you've paid, and they basically keep a hold on your card and they charge your card for that tip in the next day or two after you've had that sit down meal. So that's how that system all works. Question 3, is it scary? In terms of like the Second Amendment, it definitely crosses my mind, but overall there's a lot more security here than there is in Australia. Like I have to either show or scan my Harvard ID in any Harvard building I enter, which was a shock to the system at first as well, because I've never had to do that in Australia. So it definitely crosses my mind, but there's added security precautions. And then in terms of the election, I would honestly say you wouldn't know that there's an election coming up, which I was surprised by. I thought there would be a lot more like active discussion. I thought I'd be seeing posters around, but no, you see the occasional message and something come through about it, but overall, I honestly have not heard a peep about it. I am back. It is now Wednesday the 21st. My phone ran out of storage yesterday, so I'm back to answer the rest of the questions. Let's do it. Question 4. How has your first month been and how are you really doing? It's kind of like a 2 for the price of 1. And honestly, and now today's the 21st as well, so literally a month today, I left Perth, which is wild to me. But it's honestly been the craziest month ever, so I'm kind of not surprised it's gone as quickly as it has. So the first week I was in New York, and then I came up here. That second week was slowed down whilst I was kind of just like settling in. But then ever since then, we've had full-time classes. So it's been like go, 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 go. Like we've done 3 classes by the end of this week and earned 12 credits, which out of our minimum of 42, like that's quite a lot in a month. And you know, between learning all that content, meeting so many people, like, and I moved house again as well for the 3rd time in a month. So yeah, I'm kind of not surprised that I've made it here as quickly as it seemed. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this next month kind of goes once I sort of get into routine with these fall classes that will start at the beginning of September. And how am I really doing? So this is kind of alluding to my infamous move to Melbourne last year. And if you know, you know, but if you don't know, I moved to Melbourne and I hated every second of it. And even before I went, I was very explicit in the fact I did not want to go. I definitely don't regret going in hindsight, but it was a part of my life where homesickness got to me so badly. Like, it was definitely one of the lowest points I've been at in my life. And it was a really scary place to be in, honestly. This time around, I haven't experienced anything near as bad as that. I definitely still go through like highs and lows and like periods of anxiety and periods of dullness and yeah, but I'm coping with riding the wave better, a lot more than I was in Melbourne. Melbourne, my body just rejected it. It didn't want to happen, so my mind just was not letting it happen at all. Whereas here, I'm more willing to accept the challenges that are coming my way. Question 5. What has surprised me the most about Cambridge/Harvard? Honestly, it's very similar to Perth. Like, it's a lot more slower paced than I was expecting it to be. And I think that's a lot to do with the fact I spent a week in New York where everything is kind of like go, 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 go. Like, you have to have your wits about you 24/7. You have to move with people, otherwise you're just gonna get hit and like, yeah, hectic, but I loved it. But I got here and it's just this like peaceful little town that you can walk around. There's a river flowing through the middle of it. Everyone here at Hugsy is obviously so nice. Like, it's a university town. I wouldn't equate it to Fremantle, but it's a lot more similar to Perth than I thought it would be. And maybe that's what's kind of helped with not having homesickness as bad as I did with Melbourne. So I would kind of equate Cambridge more so to Perth, and then I'd say, from what I'm hearing, the California is a lot more like East Coast sort of vibe, like Sydney, Gold Coast sort of vibe. So I will have to confirm that myself. What has been the hardest adjustment to make to living across the other side of the world? I mean, the time difference is kind of an obvious one, and I have a question about that later, but I think moving in general, the hardest part is, for me personally, it's a lot to do with finding a new routine, because my routine in Perth, for example, it would always be like some form of workout in the morning, some form of coffee, whether that was by myself or with friends, and then some form of work after that. And that was a routine that I loved and I adored, and it was a big part of my identity and who I was as a person there. And when you move, whether that's like across the country, across to a different country that's not too far, or you do something as drastic as, like 12 hours away, like across the other side of the world, you still have that identity and that part of you, but obviously because it's such a different place, it's not necessarily going to offer you the same opportunity and to be able to have that routine. And so you have to build that for yourself all over again, and you kind of have to figure out who you are in this new environment. And you get caught between this like dynamic of like, you don't want to lose your old identity, but at least I don't want to lose my old identity. I was really happy and confident in the place I was at when I left Perth, but when you come into this new place and this new environment, like, you really can be whoever you want to be. Like, you are coming into this environment and no one has any preconceived idea of who you are, and so you can really make yourself whoever you want to be. And obviously I try to live authentically as I can, but yeah, that is a hard, I'd say that's the hardest part of that question of who do you want to be in this world, and it's something I'm still trying to explore. Question 7, it's a doozy. What is homesickness like? As I said before, it was probably one of the lowest points I've ever been at in my life, when I was very homesick in Melbourne. And I think it's kind of hard to put like a complete homesickness is definition, because I think it can take on so many forms. For me, I think it kind of came down to like a clash of identity almost. Like, I just didn't feel like Melbourne was really aligned with who I was as a person and what I wanted for myself and what goals I was trying to achieve. So being there, I felt very like hopeless almost, because there was nothing that I was really aspiring toward. Like, it's so hard to describe, and you just feel, when something doesn't align with who you see yourself as a person, it can be so isolating and so lonely. And when you're away from the people you love and the people you rely on, it's an awful feeling, because even when you call them, eventually you have to hang up that phone and be left with the silent room that you're sitting in, or apartment, wherever you are. And the way I coped with it was just building such a rigorous routine, which is why I preach it so much now, and why it's been a number one priority for me here, is that I think routines are very much tied to our sense of self and our identity. So when I didn't have that at first in Melbourne, I was completely lost and I was drowning in the loneliness and the homesickness. But when I slowly started building the routine, it was kind of, that was my coping mechanism and escape from the loneliness, because I was just busying myself with everything else that I was doing. Question 8, is the 12-hour time difference hard? So yeah, between Cambridge and Perth, where I'm from originally, it is a 12-hour time difference. So in Perth right now, it is 3:40 in the morning, Thursday morning. So they're 12 hours ahead. It's weird, because I think the hardest part I found about it is that my mind kind of defaults to, I will go to respond to someone in Perth, it'll be like 2 a.m. and I'll be like, okay, there's no point, because they're obviously not going to respond and I don't want to risk waking them up in case their phone's not on silent. So then I'll just say, oh, I'll do it later. And for those of you who know me, you know I'm not the best replier. So then I just forget, and then it builds up, and then it goes through another day, and then it'll get to like 2 or 3 days later, and then I'm like, oh shit, I have so many people to respond to, and I have to sit down and dedicate time to just go, okay, respond. So I'm just trying to get into a better habit of, regardless of what time it is, just reply. And you can always send a bigger message when they wake up. So that's been the biggest adjustment to make. And other than that, it's weird knowing that no one's going to respond to you. And then if they do, I always reply to them and be like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you awake at 2 a.m? Go to bed. So yeah, like I could look down at my phone at 2 p.m. and it'll be like dead. And then when I wake up the next morning, it's not that I'm bragging about how many texts I get or anything, but it's just that weird difference of because of the 12 hours, because that's when everyone will text me during their day. And then, yeah, for me, it's everyone's asleep when I'm awake. Question 9, what is being a Harvard student like? Honestly, it's still, I don't think it's completely processed in my brain that I go to Harvard. I'll catch myself being like, oh, when I go to uni, and then I go, uni is Harvard. What? It's still weird. It's still very surreal. But these past few weeks probably don't quite represent what a typical day in the life and what a typical student experience will be, just because we are in these intensives. But just between it's a completely different uni experience to what I've had in Australia. And the caliber and the quality of the professors, I could already tell is just that bit better, which you'd hope, being Harvard and everything, and the way they've styled assessments, the way they've styled this degree in terms of cross-registering at like MIT, or how I only have to nominate a few units to be letter graded, the rest are ungraded. Well, it's like pass-fail. It's just a very completely different experience. And the campus itself is just stunning. Like the red brick and the green ivy leaves are just, they're so pretty to walk by. And the building next to my new apartment is just completely covered in ivy, and it's just stunning. I love it. And that makes me so excited for fall, when all the leaves will be like orange and yellow, and it's going to be so great. But I think these intensives have given me the idea of like, class is going to be a lot, but the professors want you to succeed as well. And it's just, the word freeing comes to mind living in this part of the world, because I can easily go down to New York whenever I want, or I can fly to LA, or I can go to London. I can do whatever I want being in this part of the world, versus being in Perth and having to be like, okay, it's going to be $2,000 minimum to even get to Europe, so I have to save for the next 6 months. It is, the opportunities in this part of the world are just so limitless in a sense. There's no tall poppy syndrome. No one's here cutting down ideas. Everyone is just supporting and lifting each other up. Like, I have 15 subscribers on this channel at the moment. Like, that's nothing, but people are still so like, oh my God, that's amazing, you do that, how do you, like, there's no tall poppy syndrome here whatsoever. And I'm really glad for that, because I think I would often use that as an excuse in Perth to be like, oh, well, I don't know, like, whereas like I would justify a reason to not do things, whereas here I'm kind of just like, no, I'm going to do it all. And that kind of leads me into my last question. What do you want to do while you're at Harvard? With the no tall poppy syndrome here and the amount of opportunities, you have to search for the opportunities. They don't just hand them to you on a silver platter, but I know they're around. So I am doing a degree in education policy. The full title is a Master's of Education in Education Policy and Analysis. And we're coming into course registration at the moment. So I'm kind of feeling a bit of pressure in terms of choosing like a concentration per se. So I am potentially leaning towards concentrating in like international and comparative education. But with that, I would do that more so to get an understanding of like the global market as a whole, and like what role education plays in that, because I know I want to work for myself, and I filmed the first half of this video at the Harvard iLabs, so I've applied there. I expect I'll be spending quite a bit of time there this year. So on top of this YouTube channel, I've said it before in the vlogs, but as much as this like is a memory bank that I'm building, it's something that I definitely want to do in the future. I've always had that creative side of me. I've always loved telling stories of like, I'd always put together little travel vlogs of when I was traveling when I was a kid. And obviously having that background in performing arts as well, like creative media is just something I love and something that is just such a good outlet for me. So that's definitely one avenue. I've also written a book, as most of you will know, and I have a second one on the cards. I've kind of had the idea for about, I'd say almost a year now. I've kind of just been sitting with this idea, but being here, I've actually had the time to kind of start digging into it and exploring it and what that might look like. So I'm hoping within the year I can have a draft of a book done, and there's people literally in this cohort who have like published properly and not just through Amazon. So that's exciting. Beyond Harvard, honestly, I cannot give you a determined answer yet. I know I want to go into the entrepreneurial space. I will often equate myself to like the Australian Grace Beverley. That's kind of like the goal that we're working towards at the moment. So I'm considering moving to London, not just because that's where she is, but because like half of my family was actually born in London. I've never been there. I've always thought it looks amazing. So that's definitely on the cards. Potentially doing my MBA, depending on where this whole entrepreneurial venture leads me this year. I'm hoping to take a class at MIT in the fall, which is still wild to me that I can cross-register at MIT and go to two of the best universities in the world at once. Like, are you kidding me? So yeah, we're kind of leaning into that space, but I know at the end of the day, I want to work for myself. I want to help people make a difference, and then my values are financial freedom, so that comes back to working for myself again, even though I know that's more of a long-term goal. Health and wellness, that's obviously a big passion of mine, so if I can merge that with entrepreneurship somehow, match made in heaven. But I'm going to learn so much this year. I'm also trying to keep my mind as open as possible, and people here have done such incredible things already. Like, some people work for the TED conferences, others have published like 6-7 books, done just insane things. So as much as I know the direction I want to head in terms of, you know, the Australian Grace Beverley, I'm also open to letting these opportunities and these experiences shape where I head. So that is all the questions. I've capped it to 10, but I did yap on, so I'm sure this is going to be quite a long video in the end. If you stuck around to this point, thank you very much for sticking around. Again, not to do the cringy self-plug, but if you could spread the word, share the love, and subscribe if you liked this video, I'd obviously appreciate it so much. And if you have any other questions, especially in terms about like Harvard, the application process to get here, any sort of details that you want to know, feel free to comment below and I will respond, me and my 15 subscribers. So yeah, I really enjoyed actually sitting down and reflecting on this past month, and I'm very excited to see where the next month will take me. Maybe I'll do this like every month, a little monthly check-in and see where we're tracking. So yeah, I guess I'll see you in a month when I do this Q&A again. Other than that, have a wonderful day and go and tell someone you love them. Bye.